Good morning and welcome back to TVP World. You're watching World Talks. Ukraine is stepping up its long-range strikes deep inside Russian territory. On Saturday, Ukrainian forces targeted the Savasleyka military airbase in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod region, an important base for aircraft used to launch attacks against Ukraine. Kyiv also struck the Progress rocket facility in the Samara region, around 900 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. And joining us now to talk more about this is Olena Tregub, Secretary General, Independent Anti-Corruption Commission. Good morning and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So now, for those just catching up, can you walk us through what exactly happened in these strikes?
Well, basically, it's a continuation of Ukrainian campaign against Russian war machine and Russian economy. In this particular case, it's a very successful example we have when we were able to hit the Roscosmos in Samara region. Zelensky yesterday stated that that was done by Flamingo missile, by our Ukrainian missile, and the good thing about it is that this facility was producing microelectronics for different Russian defense tech, and in particular it was participating in the supply chain for Rassvet system, which is in a simple words, replacement for Starlink. You know that Russia doesn't have ability to use Starlink now, and they now working on their own Starlink. And so we don't know how much was hit because only different OSINT channels are describing how long the repair will take, but it's very good. And I would say also that we don't see generally strikes by Ukraine similar to Russian when they send 1,100 missiles and they hit everything, they hit buildings. We see that Ukraine strikes, they are very few as of now. For example, when it comes to this, by the way, we have air raid in Kyiv right now. When it comes to this particular strikes, they, when we had confirmed examples that we use ballistic missiles, Ukrainian missiles, it's around 7 times, but every time we choose very strategic target, we choose a specific facility where we know that we hit and the war will slow down, that instead of, you know, throwing hundreds of missiles and killing people and children like Russia is doing it. We're doing very, very targeted, and I hope it will show results. It will show effect.
Mm-hmm. And just going back to what you mentioned, these Flamingo missiles, I wanted to ask, President Zelensky said that the Flamingo missiles were used. So what does this tell us about the development of Ukraine's domestic missile industry?
Well, we know it is developing. There is a constant conversation. Their CEO and their lead engineer of Firepoint, Denis Stillerman, he is criticized for giving too many interviews because he probably gave interview in the last several months to every media outlet in Ukraine and even to some media outlets outside Ukraine. And in those interviews, he's promising how many ballistic missiles his company will make and how much he will hit Russia. And people say that this is very strange behavior because usually in Ukraine, different manufacturers of defense technology, they don't want to be very public because it's a very sensitive matter, and for security reasons and for the war reasons, it's better not to talk about it. However, he spoke about it many times, and this is because his company was under pressure. And as you know, he was accused of like receiving all government funding and also technology, the blueprints from previous times from Soviet and post-Soviet times that were stored by the Ukrainian government facilities. And this is why there was expectation of him to deliver this missile. And this project was seen as a project also supported by Zelensky, as almost like a personal project of Volodymyr Zelensky. So this is why every such launch is very much discussed in Ukraine, evaluated, and so on. And this is why also Zelensky spoke yesterday. I think if it is indeed a Flamingo missile, this is really great. But of course, we need more missiles and more targets. And we'll see whether this company will be able to scale up the production and not only have like one or two successful launches.
Mm-hmm. Because that was going to be my next question. Do you think that we can say at this point, is Kyiv beginning to develop a meaningful deterrent of its own?
Yes, we are working on this. Beginning is a good way to put it. We don't have our own deterrent yet, but we all understand that in order for Russia to stop bombarding us with barrages of ballistic missiles, we need to be able to launch our own weapon, preferably ballistic missile as well, to the launch part of Russian Federation. And only ballistic missile is capable to do this, because all this is happening within basically 3 minutes. Once we see that they are about to launch their ballistic missile, we need to launch our ballistic missile. And this will be deterrent. If we're going to launch drone or long cruise missile, that will not work. That will not be deterrent. So this is why we were so much, focused and worried whether we will have our ballistic capability or not, because we see it as deterrent. So this is the main thing. But there are other things such as drones. When we, have attacks on their oil refineries and so on, this also plays a role. But at the same time, we see now there are reports from Russia that Russia now made missiles which they plan to make for their 12 months. They made it only within 7 months. So they are ahead of the schedule. And Onyx missiles, for example. And they focus now more on ballistic missiles in Russia, because they know that we don't have this capability to intercept. And even though their economy is suffering, even though things are not so good in Russia, they still found money to make more ballistic missiles than the whole world makes their interceptors for those ballistic missiles, the whole Western world. So Russia also understands what are the critical gaps, and they are like trying to push where they see that there is an opening, and we need, of course, to counter that.
And given what you just said, you mentioned, of course, Ukraine's ability to intercept. What more can the West and Ukraine's allies still do in order to make sure that Ukraine has this capability?
Well, we need to receive the existing capability of our Western partners, which is PAC-3 missile of Patriot technology. And this is the only pretty much technology that intercepts ballistic missiles that we currently have in Ukraine, and we're using it. There are other technologies like globally that there is, I know, in Asia, there is some Korean technology, but we don't have it. We have a PAC-3 missile, PAC-2 missile, and it's a Patriot. And a number of countries in the West, in Europe, also in East Asia, but mostly United States, they have this technology. And Zelensky said that it's a tiny percentage. It's, for example, 5%. If you give us 5%, we'll be able to completely intercept all Russian missiles. But nobody, unfortunately, is giving us 5%. And our government officials, our defense ministers, for example, they have to negotiate and ask partners about each single missile. Like, please give me 2 missiles today, give me 1 missile tomorrow. And this is, of course, very, very hard and sad that our Western world was not able to produce defensive capabilities. This is defensive weapons in 5 years of full-scale war. that the Western world is so much behind this production, including, of course, our European allies.
All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing your insights. And do stay safe in Kyiv. You did mention that airstrike during our talk. Thanks again. And our guest was Olena Tregub, Secretary General, Independent Anti-Corruption Commission. Thank you very much for watching World Talks, but don't go away. There's much more coming up for you here on TVP World this morning.